Are you sitting on the edge of your seat, wondering if you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, to go out on that limb of forging your own path, to make the big career leap?
Fear is part of the process. Anxiety is part of the process.
Today's guest is America's Financial Educator, literally. Derrick Kinney trademarked that title for a reason. He's the author of Good Money Revolution and a passionate advocate for consumers doing more good with their money and for empowering the advisors who guide them.
What one woman said to me completely shifted how I thought about business.
After building and selling one of the nation's top advisory firms, Derrick now equips advisors to overcome fear, lead with purpose, and master the conversations that truly matter.
I call it your generosity purpose. We connect meaning to money and a purpose to profits and a cause to your cash.
Most of us in the wealth management industry know his name. We've seen him on stage. And today he's here with us on the podcast.
And what happened next, I just didn't see coming.
Here's my conversation with Derrick Kinney. All right. Well, Derrick, I'm super excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Shelby, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. You know, we saw each other a few months ago, and the work you're doing for advisors is off the charts. So it's really an honor to be with you today.
Oh, thank you so much. And it is an honor to be with you. I have is it fangirl? Is that what I get to say for you? I've been following your stuff for the last couple of years. I saw you at Future Proof actually 2 years ago for the first time, and you told the story of the quarter turn of the wine bottles, and that sticks with me all the time. So I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you.
You have, to me, always kind of personified this entrepreneurship mindset, right? And I know your kids are all entrepreneurs. Yeah. Were you always an entrepreneur? Did you come from a long line of entrepreneurs? As somebody who came to entrepreneurship later in life, I'm super curious.
No, actually, there was nobody in my family that I knew of that was an entrepreneur. I saw my parents working very hard. My dad was an engineer. My mom worked part-time at a fashion place. But it seemed like we were just kind of making ends meet. And, you know, I didn't know what sort of lower middle class actually was. I just know I was living in it and things were comfortable. But I always had this drive inside me to make more money. You know, it started off with a bicycle inspection business. So I would actually make up little bike inspection pieces of paper. I would inspect my parents' bike, my sister's bike. I would tape it on, kind of like an automobile inspection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like the oil change.
Exactly. And then I had this idea to buy this mix that could actually remove oil and grease stains off of driveways. That was the pathway that I thought was going to take me to millionaire status, you know, as a 10-year-old. And then my last one was I always had this interest in money. And so I made this loan amortization chart and I put it on the back of my closet. And so I would charge my parents and sister interest. I think they did it just for fun to allow them to borrow money from me. And then they would assign the interest rate of what it would cost to pay me back. So I always, you know, I was kind of fighting to get my first job at 15. I was a package clerk at a grocery store. And I just learned, you know, if you want to do something in life, it comes down to just working hard, but also building relationships. You know, even with the people I took their groceries out to their car for, the woman that would give me the quarter and say, Sonny, you know, don't spend this all in one place. And she was coming from the standpoint of that quarter meant a lot to her. And she was giving that quarter to somebody and wanting that person to really make the most of that quarter. So in honor of her, I want to make the most of all the quarters I get.
Oh my goodness. I love that. You know, I started working, I think at around 12, I babysat an entire summer for a family. Looking back now, I'm like, who hires a 12-year-old? But I was 12. My parents had twins when I was 10, and it's just me and them. And so this family knew that my mom was, you know, a minute away and could be, you know, kind of on standby. But I worked every day that summer when I was 12 years old with this little girl. So I can appreciate that. And my money story growing up is do work, get stuff, right? Do work, have money, get stuff, right? And so I could definitely relate to you and how you grew up. You built your advisory firm. Talk about kind of just very briefly for the audience, give them your 5 seconds snippet of your advisory practice. But then you sold it and now have turned into an entirely different business. Talk about that change.
Yeah. So I squeezed 4 years into six in college, was working almost full time to pay my way through. My parents had, my dad had lost his job my junior year in college, so they moved up to Oregon. I stayed here in Arlington, Texas, found a family from my church to live with for the year and a half they were gone. And what I realized was I really had an interest in money. I only took one finance class in college. Okay. My degree was actually in communication in college. And I enjoyed giving speeches and talking and all this type of stuff, which makes sense given where I am right now. But I found myself in a dead end job right out of college. And I got passed over for a raise, a big bonus. I was the one marketing person at the firm. Everybody else were the engineers and they got the big money. And I reached this crossroads, Shelby, and I thought to myself, I can either stay stuck in this job and let someone else tell me what my economic value is, which typically meant a 2 to 4% raise if I was lucky every year, or I could take the chips and I could put them all on Derrick and give the wheel a spin. And that was the moment that I began to investigate becoming a financial advisor. So, having basically no financial experience, I just loved making money. I loved watching money grow, and I loved giving money. And I thought if I could help other people do that and kind of escape this middle class trap that I saw my parents snared in and help their friends do the same thing, that would be pretty meaningful to me. So, I began to get licensed and do all these things in the evenings and the weekends. And so at 26, I launched my own financial planning firm. But I had a big problem. I was 26, but I looked like I was 13. No gray hair, no wrinkles, no natural market, no country club membership. But I had a
Mhm.
passion for supporting local education. And so I had this crazy idea because when I was in high school, nobody successful ever came back and gave us a glimpse of what future could look like. They just said, take your math and science and everything's going to be okay. And we really thought that was kind of a weak plan at best. And so I went to my local high school with a $50 Amazon gift card for the teacher and a $25 Amazon gift card for the student. And I began to give a teacher and a student of the month award at my local high school, Sam Houston here in Arlington. And what happened next, I just didn't see coming. I just wanted to breathe life into these students and teachers and let them know how much we appreciated and valued what they did. And they would take a picture of myself and the teacher, the student, the principal, put this in the newspaper way back in the day. And I began to get phone calls a couple months later. And Shelby, what one woman said to me completely shifted how I thought about business. She said, Derrick, we know you're new, we know you're young, but we like the fact that you're giving back and supporting local education. We want you to be our financial advisor. And she said, it's because you care about what we care about. You care about what we care about. And in that moment, it was like this weight lifted off my shoulders. And it meant I didn't have to be the best looking or the most knowledgeable or the most well connected. I just had to care about what the people I wanted to work with cared about. And what I realized was it became like a magnet for millionaire families. She was my first millionaire client. And I realized that most millionaires are busy. They want to do more in the community. They often can because they're working so hard, but they like to work with professionals, primarily advisors, who are givers in the community. It gives them a sense of status and it makes them feel like they're giving because they're working with a professional who is a giver.
Yeah, yeah. It's super interesting how you turned that tiny statement into a almost mission and a way of bolstering also your own confidence. It sounds to me like you just switched it and said, I care about what they care about. Therefore, I am able to serve them. I have zero doubts now about my ability to serve them.
Yeah, it's funny because plenty of people doubted me, though. It's funny because when I left my job, which I knew was a dead end, no future, feeling stuck everyday job, this was the job where my paycheck actually bounced twice, if you can
Oh
imagine.
my gosh.
Like I would give money to our church and imagine calling your pastor of the church saying, hey, my check I just wrote as a giving check is actually hot and it's going to bounce. That was embarrassing. Or my boss would call us on Friday and say, hey, by the way, Saturday is a work day. Have to call my wife and break our plan. She was crushed. I was crushed. I was like, I can't live like this long term. This is not
Mhm.
the place for me. I just couldn't do
Yeah.
that. But what I realized was I had a passion, but also there's a part in the book I write about this, and it's a picture I think about a lot. It's when Cortez took his men onto this island, and he basically burned the ships. And he
Mhm.
said, "There's no turning back." And I didn't know it at the time, but there was this power of I have quit my job. My wife and I's financial future depends on what I do every day. I'm going to make this happen. People said, Derrick, you don't have enough money in your checking account or savings account to last. What experience do you have? What I had was a passion to help people and a passion that if there's any best investment, it was me. And I was going to bet on me every single time.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful. We work a lot here at Muriel Consulting with people who are breaking away from a more traditional firm or path as an advisor and often going out on their own, standing up their own firm for the first time. And there's so much fear. And I get it. I was not an entrepreneur until the last several years, right? I worked 25 years as a W 2 in the corporate ranks, went up the ladder like you're supposed to do, did everything right, and then finally became an entrepreneur
Mm.
and bet on myself for the first time. It takes a lot of courage. It takes just a lot of work and gumption and such to do that. You did it at such a young age. I'm so proud of that. And then now you're, I guess I admire that about you so much. Now you're teaching your kids this. How are you getting it down to your kids now also?
Well, we've got 4 kids. So my daughter is now 26. She's married. Other daughter's 24. She's married. My boys are 22 and 20. And as you said earlier, all of them are now entrepreneurs. They all have their own businesses. So my 2 daughters went to college. My 2 sons chose not to go to college. But for what they each wanted to do, it's actually worked out perfectly for what they wanted. And when I think about this, some of this was intentional and some was unintentional. And I'll give you an
Mhm.
example. About 6 months ago, my oldest daughter, she and I were on a Jeep ride together. And it's my favorite time with my kids because I get to listen to their playlist and just spontaneous conversations come out when you're kind of looking straight ahead and listening to
Mhm.
great music. It's like the parenting hack of the century. And so my daughter says, Dad, you realize that none of us would have our own businesses if you hadn't had the courage to launch yours.
Yeah, that's right.
And it hit me like a punch to the gut because, Shelby, I never thought of it like that before. I just knew that for me and for my family and for how God made me to be, I needed to be bold and courageous and face fear and launch this business. What I learned though was as a parent, more is caught than taught. I
Mm.
could tell them things, but when they observed things, that was the most powerful piece. And one of the biggest mistakes I made, I had a wise friend pull me aside one time and he said, Derrick, you're striving to look perfect and really keep up that you've got it all together all the time. He said, you need to relax. And he said, remember that people like imperfect people better. People like imperfect people better. And it just allowed me to take a big exhale. There was one time where I was going after office hours to my daughter's volleyball game. And I had a few minutes to swing by and I changed out of my suit and put on shorts and a t-shirt. And I was kind of nervous because I'm like, well, my clients are going to see me in this. Many clients walked up and said, Derrick, it's so nice to see you relaxed. It's nice to see you dressed like us. And
Mm.
I thought it was going to be an issue. They actually appreciated normal, real, and raw Derrick in a pair of shorts. So fast forward, I'm in another Jeep ride. This was just a few months ago. My youngest son, Dylan, and he and I were talking, and I said, "So Dylan, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do now that you're not going to go to college? What's your plan?" And he said,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm going to start a business." And I said, for whatever reason, I said, "Why?" And he said, well, because that's what we do in our family.
Whoa.
And there was again, I got punched in the stomach again. I couldn't even breathe for a second. Like, oh my gosh, he's grown up in a culture that he believes launching a business is what we do because he saw all of us do that. And one of the things I learned along the way, and I wish I would have learned this sooner, and if it can help our listeners, is I wouldn't share mistakes with my kids. I would always
Mhm.
kind of tell them, hey, here's what's going great. And I would give them more the lectures versus
Yeah.
the lessons. And during COVID, we played this game. Everybody was back home. We played this game called Highs and Lows. Hey, your highs of the day, lows of the day. And I realized my answers were typically pretty boring. But one day I made this investment and lost a couple $1,000s. I said, I'm going to share this as my low. So it came my turn, and I said, hey guys, Dad made an investing mistake today. I lost several $1,000s. Well, you could have heard a pin drop. They were murmuring, oh my gosh, Dad really screwed up. This is going to be really, really good. And so I told them, I said, yeah, when you go into the market, you make some money, you lose some money. But here's what I learned from that. And they still remind me of that story because it made them or me appear to them real and authentic. Dad wasn't
Mhm.
just dad, he was like a regular guy who can lose money just like I can.
Yeah, yeah, it's super powerful to know those lessons. I this week I took my 13-year-old to see the Broadway play The Outsiders. It was here in St. Louis at the
Wow.
Fox.
Huh?
I remember reading that book as a child, it being my very favorite book. Probably I would still name it as my favorite book. And so I took him there, and I'd had this difficult client situation over the last couple of weeks, and I was talking with him about that. And I was sharing with him like I was really struggling with like what could I have done differently in this situation to have avoided the outcome. And it was amazing because he started telling me, "Well, mom, it's not your fault." Or mom, did you think about this? And I mean, it was a wonderful
Wow.
conversation of that sharing back and forth. But
Yes.
also I want to say my 7-year-old said to me the other day that he was starting like some type of business. I've forgotten what it was. I think related to his Hot Wheels or something. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's picking up that we own a business. This
Mm,
is this is coming down the path for him, right? Where it's bleeding through. This is amazing." So,
I
really
love that.
admire what your kids are doing.
Well, and it's interesting. I had this idea. This has been probably 15 years or so ago. I decided to launch a business and investing club at our kids' school. And I remember approaching my daughter with, I called it the gift of dad. I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, Lauren, I want to, kind of share some things with you, give you some wisdom from dad, kind of give you this inside track, kind of a leg up on things. And I described this club to her, and she was like, no, thanks, not interested. And I kind of left the room feeling defeated and embarrassed. Like, what just happened? My daughter basically just kind of squashed me. So I re-engineered my approach, and I came back a couple days later. And I said, "Hey, Lauren, one of the things about this business club, and by the way, I don't think you're going to like it, but we give everybody their favorite candy every time they show up." "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, but I don't know if it's going to be for you." But we talk about how to start a business. We give away gift cards. We have contests and games, but I don't know if it's going to be something that you would like or not. Well, let me judge that, Dad. Tell me more about it. And before we knew it, at the end of the semester, the hook was set in her mouth, and she sat on the front row of the business club for the next 4 years. And so what I realized was it's always tricky when you're the parent and you're teaching your kids. But one of
Mhm.
the advantages was when you're the parent teaching the whole group of kids, and those kids seem to like what you're saying, it forces your own kids to like what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I just think it's so interesting how entrepreneurship has played through that, and even starting a club, right? You're like, I have this idea, I'm going to make it work. Even the way that you changed that approach reminds me a little bit of that quarter turn,
Mm,
kind of an idea, right? Because what you did is you said, okay, I'm not going to let that no stop me. I'm going to go back and re-engineer my idea and come at her again, right? And
right.
I think that's again kind of this overcoming fear sort of idea. When I got to think when you were writing your book or starting to write your book, or had the idea for your book of Good Money Revolution, you probably got some no's along the way of that book.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
probably had to do some quarter turn kind of an experience. Any stories stand out from that?
Oh my gosh. How long is this podcast?
Right. Yeah.
When you say that, Shelby, two things come to mind. This is actually my second book to write. But in both cases, I pursued hard to get a book deal to write these ideas. I mean, it was an important book. I just felt like I had a sense of urgency that if it was to be, it was up to me. And I needed to make this happen. And I remembered with my first book, and I remember my second book, the exact same thing happened. Literally, I signed this book deal. I get paid to write the book, get an advance. And the moment it comes time to write, there's this fear,
Mm,
immense fear. And it's like the computer screen is looking back at me, pointing, saying, "You are a failure, Derrick. You're a fraud. You have no reason, you're no credibility to write this book. Who are you to write this book?" And I had to come to terms with, well, you may say that, computer screen, but in this moment, I, Derrick Kinney, am the expert on this topic. And there's
mhm,
no one who's going to write about this topic like I will. And so
mhm,
I just had to create a discipline. And so I would write 3 double spaced Microsoft pages, which were 1,000 words every morning before I could allow myself to go to the office. And the first couple days, it was like the worst writing ever. I was like, I don't know who's writing this. I hopefully nobody reads this. But then I began to develop a rhythm and an expectation, much like a newspaper reporter or anybody who writes in the media today. They wake up every morning, they don't know what they're going to write about, but they know that when they go to bed that night, they will have written about a story that is done now. They have the
mhm,
confidence that they will do it. And so I would just know, okay, you're just going to write. And that was the first book lesson. The second was I learned how to write more conversationally. And instead of
mhm.
writing, sometimes when you write, you begin to use bigger words than when you talk. Like
Yes.
when you type, you come up with words like consequently, or as a result of, furthermore. And if I'm having coffee with a dear friend, I'm not going to say to them, well, furthermore, how was your day today? And consequently, how are the kids? You don't talk like that. So instead, I discovered this hack of I would sit at my desk, press record, and I would speak the book as though I were having coffee with a friend. And what happened was it came across more conversational. Now I simply had chapters to edit and not have to bang out on the keyboard. Okay.
Mhm.
So what I learned was that fear is part of the process. Anxiety is part of the process. Even every time I speak, I do quite a bit of speaking all over the country. And just being honest here, every time before I'm about to go on, I feel like I'm going to throw up.
Yeah.
And actually, I know I'm actually excited because I know if I don't feel like I'm going to throw up, I really have to ramp up the energy. But the
Right.
throw up is almost like the key reminder, like, okay, this is going to be a really good talk. And so, what I would just tell people listening is so much of social media makes success look like it should be easy. If you're struggling, if you're really fighting a lot of challenges, maybe you shouldn't be a financial advisor. Maybe you shouldn't. No, that's part of the deal. If you
Yeah.
want to be in the top 1%, you're going to have about 99% more challenges than most other people. And when you can embrace that as part of the journey and not punishment for being on the journey, that's the
Mhm.
pathway to winning.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's the whole phrase now of do it scared, right?
Yes.
And you just have to. But what I thought was interesting in your book and just on this fear topic, it says in your book, you wrote the fear of the unknown of what might happen, most of which is only imagined and in most cases never comes true.
Yeah.
It's the fear inside your own head that is trapping you. The fear of your past, of what you think might occur, or what that voice in your head is telling you will occur. And you have to instead turn those thoughts around, send yourself a continuously looping message that you should reject your well worn path of dashed money dreams. Like,
Mm,
I love that, right? A continuously looping message.
yeah.
I think that is such a central piece that so many people they sort of overlook, right? Because they think, oh, if this is to be, it's going to come easily.
Right.
No. If this is to be, if you're meant to move from one type of firm to another type of firm and you have to leave that captivity, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
There is nothing going to be easy about it.
And
And
Shelby, I
all
would,
day
yeah,
long,
yeah, I
yeah,
would
go
only,
ahead.
well, given, I mean, as well respected as you are in your space, I would only guess that you probably work with people that occasionally the fear gets the better of them. Like they know it's better over there, but the fear of going from here to over there paralyzes them and they stay trapped. And you know how close they are to something better.
So close.
So
So
close.
close.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so even starting my own businesses. There's a lot of daily reminders. I'll tell you a quick story. So I work with a trainer twice a week. And this morning, we're working on bench press. We did 5 sets, and today was PR day. So he was adding weights on each side, and the goal was just to get basically one press on this new higher weight. And there was this moment where I pictured as clear as day, all 4 of my kids were sitting on the bar. And they were all looking at me saying, Dad, we need you right now to do this. And it was this moment of like, I can't let my kids down. Well, I was just lifting weights, but it was the moment I needed to push up and say, I will do this for my kids, if nothing else. And I shoved that weight to the ceiling. And sometimes when you're successful, you just have to find a split second's worth of hack that will get you through the momentary fear. And that's what happened for me today.
Well, and what you did there is you made it bigger than you. Suddenly it was about your kids looking on you, right? So you talk a lot about purpose. How has purpose driven you over your fear?
Well, purpose to me is everything. The core part of the book, and I'll go back a second here. When I would talk to my clients, many of them would say, Derrick, it feels like in the news media, they talk about how money is bad. And if you make a lot of money, then you're really bad. And if you're a billionaire, well, you must be holding other people back from their goals and dreams so you can hold all the money yourself, and you should be sharing that. And some of them were like, I don't know if I really want to make a lot of money. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? You're paying me. This violates the agreement that we have. You pay me, I help you make money. And what I realized was until we connect meaning to money and a purpose to profits and a cause to your cash, well, most people only base their validation on a bulging bank account. I want to have 7 figures. I want to have 8 figures. And they work hard. They give up almost all their relationships, all their time, their interests. And then they reach the top of the mountain eventually and they look around and nobody's there. They can hear themselves echo. And what I realize is money is not bad and good people should have more of it. But the key is to tie a cause to your cash. So just like for me, I call it your generosity purpose. So quick story. I had a guy named Dave. This is in chapter 5 of the book, incidentally. He comes in the office, longtime client. And you know those relationships, Shelby, you've got where you can simply tell how a person's feeling without them saying a word, just by their body language?
Yeah.
Dave sat down, slumped in his chair. You could tell the weight of the world was on this guy's shoulders. And I said, Dave, what's wrong? And he said, I'm not feeling motivated to go to my office anymore. I'm not feeling the excitement I once felt. And for whatever reason, the words shot out of my mouth, Dave, is there a cause that you care about? And his eyes got as big as saucers. He leaned back and began to reflect on a trip. Tells me the story of a trip he took his family on overseas a couple years earlier. And he remembered the guide telling his family that this area was totally in poverty. But it could be changed if one thing happened, if there was a dedicated school building to educate the kids. It would revolutionize this entire area of the country. And he remembered exchanging a glance with his wife as if to say, hey, wouldn't it be cool to fund that school? Okay. And they got back to the States, life got busy, business, etc. But my question brought this all back. And I said, Dave, what if you did this? What if you set an aggressive sales goal for this year and you took half of that increase and used it to fund that school? Well, now we began to talk and brainstorm about what that might look like. And we came up with a strategy. Normally, I would see him every 6 months. He happened to pop in the office 3 months later. He looks younger. He looks reinvigorated. He looks like he's back on the game. And I said, Dave, what happened? You look like a different guy. He said, well, this generosity purpose just remotivated me. I put a tab on my website, mocked up a picture of the school, and I began to let our clients know that, hey, you can work with any consultant in the area, but when you work with us, a portion goes to support this school and make people's lives better. And when he'd ask for referrals, he let them know, hey, you could work with anybody, but when you work with us, you're helping make these people's lives better. And his team got motivated. They no longer were just pushing paper clips and paper around. Now they were part of a company. We want to make money to help fund this school. And then most importantly, Dave himself now had a purpose. He wanted to grow the company so that he could grow the amount of money he made to make other people's lives better. They actually funded that school within about 6 months. And so that whole principle then became a central piece of the book. And I've now taught it to thousands of advisors and entrepreneurs around the country, because ultimately the greatest fear of the entrepreneur is burnout. I'm going to give everything to this goal. I'm going to put everything into it. And they lay their head on the pillow at night and they feel like, what am I doing? But when you have a generosity purpose, a cause that you care about, that motivates you to say, what's happening with the homeless or the hungry or teachers not having the resources they need, that is just not right. And I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to grow my business by helping so many people increase the value of their lives and their portfolios so I make more money so I can help solve that problem. Then you lay your head on the pillow at night and you feel like you've lived a day of purpose and meaning, and it motivates you. So the goal is go make a lot of money by helping a lot of people so that you can do a lot of good.
I love it. Love it. And I love it's much more fun too, right?
Yes.
It's tons more fun. You have the purpose. You're getting that whole dopamine rush of generosity. I mean, the science behind what you're describing is so strong. It's so strong.
You're right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people don't really think about the science of it. But what I
Mhm.
talk about is, think about if you anonymously gave someone that you care about something.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we love to give. And there was a moment in a Sunday school class many, many years ago. This couple was really down on their financial luck. Things were not going well. They needed to have a roof put on their house. And so
Mhm.
we rallied everybody behind the scenes and basically collected the money. And we put basically this envelope of cash anonymously in their mailbox. Okay. And
Oh,
as
wow.
odds would have it, this guy calls me and says, Derrick, you're not going to believe what happened. Well, now I've got to practice my doggone poker face and act like I have no knowledge at all of what he's
No,
talking
I've
about.
no idea.
Yeah. So what I will tell you is if you choose to be a giver, practice your poker face, because God often has a sense of humor where you might be the very person the person you helped comes back and tells, not knowing that you were involved in it. So act like
Oh
you have
my
no
gosh.
idea what's going on.
I love it. I love it. Well, I feel like the real lesson in all of this is when we were talking about purpose. And if I think about those advisors that have the fear,
Yeah.
is you can get over the fear by having a really amazing purpose.
Yes.
It's not just getting over, the worry of burnout or the boredom of your work or whatever. You can get over anything when you have an amazing purpose.
And what I would add to that would be, when you're confident in your own personal business operating framework. When
Yeah.
I'm on a stage, there's a part where I say, if you remember only two things I tell you, remember this. You want to own an instantly relatable problem that your ideal prospect has. That when you say that problem, they instantly say, oh my gosh, this person gets me. That's exactly what keeps me awake at night. And then, second, you want to have a cause that you care about. Because what we find is people that have money, as I mentioned earlier, they derive status from working with a professional that is known as a giver in their community. So many people are like, well, I want to be a private giver. I don't want people to know what I'm doing. And that's fine. You can choose to do that. What I stumbled upon as a 26-year-old advisor who looked like he was 13 was that by letting people know that you're a giver, you then motivate other business owners to also be givers. And it opened up
Mhm.
this doorway of marketing that I simply could not have predicted. I thought people would choose the smartest and the best looking. Now, that's negotiable for me, and the most well connected. They only wanted to work with people who align with them. They assume you're knowledgeable, they assume you're competent, they assume you'll put their best interests first. But when you have a cause you care about, there's this uniting story together.
Mhm.
That's powerful. So when other competitors call, I like to call it the moat principle, that if you're a known giver in the community and you take great care of your clients and you treat them like they're the kings and the queens in your universe, when they get the free dinner invitations or the other competitive advisor comes calling, they're going to say, no, I work with Shelby. I work with Derrick. I would never work with anybody else. And a lot of that comes from giving, and people feel like because they work with you, they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, yeah, that's so powerful. And I think that idea of building a moat is something, even I'm thinking a few episodes back, we had Colleen Bowler on the
Yes.
podcast. And Colleen and I talked about this idea of building a
Great.
moat around the practice and how do you do that? Right. And what you've just identified is another way of building that moat. And then if I think about some of our listeners are thinking about those future iterations of their business, you got to build that moat first. And then you've got to figure out how to take that moat to your new location too,
Yeah.
right? And wrapping that purpose can really drive you to doing the podcasts and the YouTube and all the marketing activities that maybe you're feeling called upon and the kind of tug on your heart. Well, it's not just a tug on your heart. It's not just a desire, a small desire for you to do it. It's a conviction to educate others and to improve other people's lives. That's really what you might be feeling in those
Yes.
moments, right? So we got to make it bigger than us. It's not just about us. It's about all of the good that we can do as advisors, as people in this industry, et cetera.
It's interesting as you say that. It reminds me, and I think you'll relate to this story. There was an advisor who came to me who was considering changing firms. And we talked about the pros and the cons and why nots and so forth. And he was basing the decision primarily on the platform and the products available and the payout. And I said, well, how will you change as an advisor between the firm you're at now and the new firm? And I could tell the question stunned him. He said, what do you mean, Derrick? I'm the same advisor I've always been. I said, well, why not treat this sort of like you're in elementary school and your parents just got a job transfer and now you get to be a completely fresh version of yourself. All the qualities you don't like about yourself, this new group of students will never know about. So you get to reinvent yourself. I said, why don't you pick one or two things to reinvent you as a person? And he said, well, tell me more. I said, well, what would be the instantly relatable problem that your ideal prospects would instantly connect with? See, he built his practice just hard nosed features and benefits of the products and services were better than this other
Mhm.
advisor. He became the commodity and he
Mm.
wasn't able to charge what his true value was. And I said, when you become the specialist, just like if you were to have a delicate heart procedure done, would your first inclination be, I'm going to reach out to my general practitioner who knows a little bit about a lot? Or would you want to go to the heart specialist who all they did was work on hearts 24/7? You go to the
So,
specialist. Yeah.
mhm.
And what you know is there's three things that would happen when you would go to the specialist. Number one, let's say that today it's Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Would you expect if you called today to get in first thing in the morning to see the specialist, or would you have to wait?
I would absolutely have to wait.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
depending on your insurance, this can vary, but would you expect to pay more or less to see the specialist?
More.
More. And then third, would your mentality going in to see the specialist be I'm probably going to do the surgery myself. I'm a do it yourselfer. I'm not going to listen to what they have to say. Or I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to write down or record everything that doctor tells me.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we know is when you can declare yourself as a specialist solving a unique and instantly understandable and relatable problem, people's incomes of advisors, they go up automatically. And so this advisor, I said, you can change firms, no problem, but change yourself as you're changing the firm, because that's a way to get the
Mhm.
double double in terms of true business growth, and not just scaling the business, but scaling yourself.
I love that idea. Obviously, we talk a lot with people who are switching firms. And one of the things we talk about is finding the daylight between your old experience and your new experience.
Yes.
So a similar, kind of similar take, but I love how you made it about the advisor. How are you going to be different in this new environment than what you were? How is your experience going to be different? How is your team going to be different?
Yeah.
There has to be some things that are consistent, right? Because clients don't want every single thing under the sun to change about them, right?
Right.
About the new world. But they want to see change. They want to see things get better. That's the whole rationale for you making the switch of any kind, whether it's switching planning tools inside of your existing practice or switching actual platforms, et cetera, right? Like anytime you're making a change in your business, there has to be something better in it for the client in some way that it's making you a different advisor. Love that.
I totally agree. Well said.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I know we're getting kind of to the end of our time together. I have a few just very like quick hit lightning round kind of questions is how I close up all of my podcasts. What is one tool or piece of tech that makes your life easier?
Well,
There's a lot, right?
you're gonna think I'm like 95 years old when I say this. So I'm an A personality, but I do struggle with attention and focus. Okay. So the tech tool that helps me the most, it's actually a timer that is in 15-minute increments. And what I find is when I'm in heavy detail brain cell burning work, I can't focus for an hour, even 30 minutes, but I can give my all in a sprint for 15 minutes. But the key tech is to put my phone in a different room, which dramatically takes away distraction.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I can appreciate that very much. All right. And then the question that I love to ask everyone, obviously the podcast is called Advisors Off Script. We believe here in leading lives that are off script, that are somehow distinct and exactly ours. What is a way that you're living an off script life today?
Well, we just did our family goal setting. So I took all of our family through a goal setting exercise of setting one key goal in 5 areas. And one of the processes that I go through is asking all of us the question, what's at stake if I don't do this? What terrible, no good, very bad thing will happen? What relationship will go put together? What business goal will go unmet? What financial goal will you miss? What relationship will be impacted? And so that's kind of how I live, is every day when I watch an hour of TV at night with my wife, have I lived a day that I would put my name proudly to? Or did I just skate by? Because ultimately, I'm the only one that knows. But I want to make sure that I get the double double. Did I give it my all to grow the business? And while I'm watching my Netflix show, I'm enjoying the show, knowing that I enjoyed making progress that day.
Oh, I love that. I'm an achievement hound, if you will. And so I like to get a gold star and I like the A's and all of those things. So I love that question, that self-reflection and self-awareness that you're doing. Derrick, thank you so much for the honesty, the insight, the conversations about fear. I just really appreciate everything that you've been doing in our industry to make advisors better, everything that you do with your book and the work that you do on television to educate consumers and Americans about their finances. To our listeners, thank you all for being here. Please subscribe and share the episode. Derrick, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Shelby. I've enjoyed every minute of this. Thanks for a great conversation.